Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our webinar for this evening. I'm Aaron Shapiro, the Executive Director of Patapsco Heritage Greenway, and really delighted to welcome you to this evening's presentation and discussion. I'll do some brief introductions of all the panelists who have joined us. Turn it over briefly to Suzanne Flinchbaugh from Restoring Bull Branch. Then you'll see me very briefly to go through the logistics and how we'll handle the comments and feedback for this evening. And then I'll be turning it over to Amy Hennessy and Andy Parks from ESA and Gannett Fleming, respectively. But what I want to start is just acknowledging that what we're doing this evening is presenting the draft of the Bull Branch Watershed Assessment and plan, and the idea, the purpose behind this meeting is to really solicit public input and feedback, to gather comments, to answer questions that any of you may have, so that ESA and Gannett Fleming, in cooperation with us, can continue to work on the report. We don't expect a final report until the fall. So the idea is that the feedback from this public meeting, and you'll certainly have opportunities if we're not able to answer every question this evening, to provide written feedback to us via email, or certainly can call us as well to inform the process moving forward. So I'll just briefly introduce the panelists that are here, and then let Suzanne talk, and then you'll hear from me again. From Patapsco Heritage Greenway, we have two staff members, Diana Devers and Mandy DeLeo, and our board president, Mark Sutherland. From DNR, who has supported this project for a Chesapeake and Coastal Bays Trust Fund grant, is Carrie Decker. As I said, from Restoring Bull Branch is Suzanne, representing Restoring Bull Branch is Suzanne Flinchbaugh. From the Baltimore County Department of Environmental Protection and Sustainability is Haley Amini, and then Andy Parks from Gannett Fleming, and Amy Hennessy from ESA, who you'll be hearing the bulk of the presentation from them, but we'll all be available to answer questions at the conclusion of the presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Suzanne to give a little bit of background on Restoring Bull Branch, and then I'll highlight a bit about our logistics for the rest of the evening. So we really thank you for joining us and look forward to this presentation and discussion.
Hi, yes, I'm Suzanne Flinchbaugh, and this whole project started with just a serious concern about looking out my back window and seeing nothing but dead ash trees. And what I came to realize is that I was not alone. There were other people that were concerned. I live right on the edge of the Bull Branch, and there were 5 neighbors. We were all kind of in the same place in terms of being concerned about the landscape. And we started asking questions and quickly discovered that the land that we were interested in is county and state land. And we reached out to the state and to the county, and it has just been an amazing experience of green lights. We've had so much success bringing people together to the table to talk about what is going on in our community. And I am thrilled that there are so many people here tonight to talk about this. We've learned that there are at least a dozen, if not more, stakeholders along the Bull Branch who have property that is affected by flooding, property erosion, dead plants, invasives, the whole gamut. And as we learned more, we realized that we had a much bigger problem on our hands. And in order to handle problems, you need money. So we found out that the state, through different organizations, different departments, primarily Carrie Decker's group, that they had some grant money that we could apply for. As 5 citizens, we couldn't apply for that money on our own, but we could bring the people that we had created a community with, our stakeholders, we could bring them to Patapsco Heritage Greenway, and we partnered with them, and they are the subject experts and they can manage the grant money. And this is a pilot program that we've created with them to basically say, how can we, from a grassroots, from a community level, make a difference and really affect the watershed quality, and really address the landscape and make it look better and work better. So I am so excited to be here tonight with all of you. I would just like to say that we already received a great compliment from ESA and Gannett Fleming, saying that it's clear that this community cares about its property and its landscape, because it turns out we've really, in different groups and in different ways, we've all been taking care of it, but I'll let Amy talk more about that. But thank you for being here tonight, and this is just the beginning of the conversation. We will absolutely continue to talk with people and work with everyone. So thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. I really appreciate it, and it's been a pleasure sort of helping launch this off the ground as part of this pilot effort with a local group of citizens who are interested in the project and in the work that's being done. So I promised that I'd say a few things about logistics before turning it over to Amy and Andy. As a webinar attendee, we can't see you, but we know that you're listening and watching. So we would ask this evening that throughout the presentation, if you have questions, please put them in the chat box, and make sure that you write them in the chat box for everyone. So the idea here is that everybody who's attending should be able to see the questions. The other option is if you have a particular technical problem and you still have the ability to access the chat box, and you need to just send a message to us as panelists about a technical problem, you can use the drop-down menu to do that. But we'd really prefer that you just send questions and comments to the everyone feature in chat, so that everybody can see all of those questions. We will likely hold those questions and comments until ESA and Gannett Fleming is done with their presentation. As we well know, you may have a question on an early slide or early discussion point that will get answered later in the presentation. So we want to make sure that we answer as many questions and engage as many comments as possible. If for some reason you're not able to connect via chat, you can also raise your hand, and Diana will acknowledge you, and we can open up the microphone to let you ask your question as well at the conclusion of the presentation. One quick reminder is that we are recording this session, and the session will be available on our YouTube channel for folks to watch and review. So certainly if you don't have a question right now, but you spend some time thinking about it, you want to go back and remind yourself of a bit of the presentation, you can certainly send us comments so anytime following the session. Everybody will receive a message with all of that information, anyone who attended the session. And then I would be remiss not to mention that we will be doing a sort of walk and talk in the Bull Branch next Thursday at 6 p.m. So for those of you who are interested, there'll be a sign up link. It's on our Eventbrite page. There'll be a sign up link that goes out with the email that you receive as a post attendee, and you're welcome to sign up or spread the word to just join us in the Watershed for a sort of walk and talk and orientation to many of the places we'll be discussing this evening. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amy and Andy, and it's pretty much their show to run and to highlight the work that they've undertaken over the last several months to get us to this draft report stage, and certainly encourage you to ask as many questions and provide as much feedback as possible. We certainly welcome it. So Amy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for turning out this evening to go over the methods and the results of the Bull Branch Watershed Assessment and Plan Development Draft Report. The purpose of this report was to provide a holistic watershed-wide approach to identify stormwater treatment best management practices and stream restoration opportunities within the Bull Branch watershed. And what does that mean? The first thing that we did a desktop assessment of all the existing data. We sent out information requests to Maryland Department of Natural Resources, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Maryland Historical Trust. We analyzed the BMPs for retrofit potential, and we looked at new locations where they would be a good opportunity to help provide water quantity and quality benefits in the watershed. We performed a stream corridor assessment where we walked all of the Bull Branch channels and its tributaries to look for environmental problems. And these included channel alteration, erosion, exposed pipes, pipe outfalls, fish barriers, inadequate buffers, trash dumping, and unusual conditions, which was usually in the form of a sanitary sewer leak. After this, we looked at all of our data and we looked at the worst problems in the watershed, and we prepared 2 preliminary concept drafts. And we also characterized the forest and provided potential planting areas. So that was just the summary of everything we did, and I'm going to walk you through in the presentation in a little bit more detail. For the desktop analysis, we reviewed Baltimore County and Maryland State GIS layers. We looked at the historic properties, land use, hydrologic soil types, wetlands, and utilities. The example map provided is the historic properties within the Bull Branch watershed. So we created a series of maps that show these layers. The watershed is approximately 940 acres. The overall impervious is 26.5%, and the urban area is 44.2%. Now, this is where Bull Branch meets the Patapsco River. So this is lower in the watershed. In the upper portion of the watershed, the impervious is much higher. It's 46.5%, and the urban area is 85%. So much more urban in the upper watershed with the commercial and medium density residential land. For our purposes, we divided the watershed into 3 different sections, the upper, the middle, and the lower, where we consider the upper is everything north of South Rolling Road. The middle is from Foxhall Farm Road to South Rolling Road, and the lower is from the Patapsco River to Foxhall Farm Road. And this was mainly divided based on similar land use types. We heard back from Maryland Department of Natural Resources and Fish and Wildlife Service and Maryland Historical Trust. They let us know that the lower watershed, Patapsco Valley State Park, is within a sensitive species project area review and is also forest interior dwelling bird habitat, also known as FIDS habitat. There's also the threatened long-eared bat in the Patapsco Valley State Park, and it's the candidate species monarch butterfly. So what this means is any restoration practices that would need to occur in the Patapsco Valley State Park area would need to be coordinated with Maryland Department of Natural Resources, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and also Maryland Historical Trust for the easement properties, which is the Hilton Mansion, which is on CCDC property. And so Andy, it wasn't focused on the BMP assessment results, so he's going to lead that portion of the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Amy. What we did was we went out and looked at all the BMPs that we could find within the watershed, which totaled about 11. A fair amount of these were spread out through the upper watershed and the middle watershed, because there really weren't any in the lower watershed, because that's mostly where Patapsco Valley State Park is. And a BMP is a stormwater management facility. It's called a best management practice. Of the ones in the upper watershed, this was the urbanized section, part of town there near Frederick Road. There's a large dry pond just north of town that takes a lot of flow from outside of the watershed before it dumps into the storm drain system that runs through town. The second BMP we looked at was an older facility that didn't really classify as any kind of current facility, and it was located behind a ball field near the elementary school. And then there was a third facility. I guess I'll need you to hit the next page, unless I can do it. Can you flip to the next page, Amy?
Yeah, it's getting hung up. I don't quite know what's going on here. There it goes.
Okay, great. BMP number 3 was an existing smaller facility over near Catonsville Elementary School. And then we also looked at placing one new BMP facility near the downstream of the parking lots that run along Frederick Road, because there's a lot of impervious area there. And we had an empty field where we could possibly put a submerged gravel wetland near the daylighted stream channel. In the middle watershed is just characterized by a bunch of smaller stormwater management ponds, kind of all located around UMBC and spread into some of the neighborhoods. They're all older ponds that were probably done more likely in the mid to late 90s, maybe early 2000s. They have outdated riser structures that are all made of corrugated metal pipe. And if you want to do any kind of retrofit to those facilities, you're going to have to replace the spillway, a section of the embankment, probably upgrade some of the floor bays, and there'll be a fair amount of excavation involved. BMP number 6 was located off Colgate Court near College Hills. It's a dry extended detention facility. Much like the rest of these, it has a small drainage area, the outdated spillway and riser structure. Number 7 is another pond over by the YMCA. It's got a small drainage area. Let's look over to the next one. BMT 10 is another existing dry pond with a small drainage area. It's got an outdated spillway and riser structure. And BMP number 11 was another one that we tried to look at, but it was located on private property, so we couldn't access it. And then the ones that we prioritized for retrofit or for new facilities. The first one is in the upper watershed. It was the first large pond just upstream of town. This is where we have a chance to retrofit this pond and try to help alleviate some of the flooding in the downtown area, because Bull Branch empties into this pond. And we have an opportunity to do some sort of continuous monitoring and control where you can draw down the water level in the pond prior to any storm events, so that you'll have more storage capacity in that pond and you can release it at a rate that you need to help not overtax the storm drain system down below. As I don't know, some of you people, the residents in the area probably know, town floods with the larger storm events, and this would help to stop some of that. The second BMP priority was, here we go. In the upper watershed, BMP number 2 was that shallow wetland facility that's located behind the ball field near the elementary school. And it's adjacent to where the storm drain outfall goes beneath Meller Avenue. There's also been flooding problems in that area, and there's several pipe inflows that outfall right into that facility, which currently has no storage facility to it whatsoever. Although I heard the county tried to excavate it at one point to try to help with some of the flooding in the area. That one can be retrofit. We can increase the footprint and construct a wet extended detention pond and possibly get about another 20,000 cubic feet of storage out of the thing. And the extended detention feature of the pond, by taking all the storm drain outfalls, we could hold that water back and release it at a lower level into that storm drain pipe that runs beneath the road, hopefully alleviating the flooding and helping by not having to replace the pipe, because that could be expensive. Also, Bull Branch runs right through that area in another pipe and then joins and goes under the road there as well. One of the other facilities we looked at was a new BMP, and that area just downstream of the parking lots along, in this case, it's off Bloomingdale, but it's just south of Frederick Road. That's where we were looking to put the submerged gravel wetland, because it's basically in the floodplain for the open channel section of Bull Branch, so we could keep it wet. And that type of facility can treat as much impervious area as we need to, that we can design it for. And currently there's about 4 acres of impervious draining to it. So it's an ideal location for that type of facility. assuming that the county or the area could get that piece of property away from the shopping center owner. I think that was all the ones I prioritized. What's on the next page? Okay, and there's one more facility in the middle watershed that we were looking at. Of all the ponds that all have some kind of issue in the middle watershed, the one on Colgate is probably one of the ones that you'd want to retrofit. You can accommodate approximately 25,000 more cubic feet of water quality volume if you excavate the bottom of that pond. And currently, because it doesn't have any forebays, it's only qualifying for a half inch of the full 1 inch of water quality storage credit that it can get, which means if you retrofit it and provide forebays for the pond, you can gain that extra amount of storage along with the water quality volume that you excavate. But unfortunately, you will also have to retrofit the spillway structure, as it's an old corrugated metal facility. All right, next slide. Okay, cool, we're down to those. All right, back to you, Amy.
Okay, so we performed the majority of the stream corridor assessment field work January through March, where we walked all the channels of Bull Branch and its tributaries. And in that, we found 21 channel alteration sites, 36 erosion sites, 7 exposed pipes, 50 pipe outfalls, 12 fish barriers, 5 inadequate buffer, 3 trash dumping, and 4 unusual conditions. So I'm going to walk you through some of examples of what we found in the upper, middle, and lower watersheds. The photograph on the left is where Bull Branch daylights just north of Bloomingdale Avenue. Above this, most of Bull Branch is piped. So in this reach, there is channel alteration. There's inadequate buffer along on the right photo is apparent. And this is also the area where we would like to propose the new BMP. This is just north of Bloomingdale Avenue. There's a fence that crosses the stream in the same location that's collecting various trash. When it rains, the trash accumulates in the fence, and this can cause additional blockages in the channel, and it can cause additional flooding. So we would propose to remove the fence from the channel and also do a trash cleanup. This area is a good area for volunteer cleanup opportunities. These photographs are behind Catonsville Elementary School, where during large storm events, the fields become saturated with water, and the water flows as surface flow onto this concrete channel and into this inlet here that then flows under Meller. So in addition to being a stormwater management issue, we thought that this was a safety issue because the drop is steep in this inlet, and it is dangerous for animals and small children. There's nothing there preventing anyone from falling into that inlet. These photographs are an example of the left is one of our few trash dumping sites. Surprisingly, there weren't that many actual dumping sites within the watershed, but this one consisted of tires and old car parts, and it looked like all old sewer covers. This would not be a good volunteer site for cleanup because you would need heavier construction equipment to help get some of the large items out of the stream there. And these photos were taken behind the properties along South Rolling Road near the high school. In this same area, there's bank erosion. Some of the banks go up to 30 feet here, and there's also exposed pipes in the forms of manholes that are dangerously close to eroding banks, as that photograph on the left shows. This is a little bit further downstream. This is behind College Hills #1, where we have bank erosion. There's a meander with an eroding bank. and a sanitary sewer all within the same photograph on the right. There's also inadequate buffers where many of the lawns are maintained. So we would recommend, if possible, if the homeowners could plant understory trees along the buffer and not have maintained lawns, that would help the stream health. These are examples of the common problems we saw. This is the middle watershed still, where we have significant bank erosion, which is causing trees to fall into the channel, which is then creating debris jams and causing additional bank erosion. The photograph on the left is bank erosion that is behind the properties at Foxhall Farm. And the right is erosion in the Patapsco Valley State Park, where at the top of the picture, you can see where there's a picnic shelter with a truck park there. So the erosion in the Patapsco Valley State Park is also threatening infrastructure. These are more example photographs of erosion in Patapsco Valley State Park, as well as channel alteration. You can see the remains of a gabion basket on the left photograph and channel erosion that's close to the roadway on the right photograph. And these are Patapsco Valley State Park. This is at the lower limit of our study area where Bull Branch flows under the CSX railroad crossing. So it's confined in this very narrow channel, and during storm events, it overflows and fills up the tunnel, which is also a safety hazard. So after we walked all the channels and we documented all the problems, we put the erosion sites, pipe outfalls, and channel alteration sites on maps so we could see where they were in the watershed. So it's important to note that the red is the erosion sites within the watershed, and the little orange circles are the pipe outfalls. And in many instances in the upper middle watersheds, the pipe outfalls and the erosion sites were related, where you would see significant erosion that was downstream of the pipe outfalls, because this is where the untreated stormwater is entering the stream. These are the same bank erosion pipe outfall graphics, but for the middle to the lower watersheds. A little bit less erosion in the lower watershed where you're in the Patapsco Valley State Park. And that's probably related to it having just a nicer riparian buffer to help protect the stream. These graphics are examples of inadequate buffer sites, fish barrier, and representative sites. So it's important to note the green is inadequate buffer. Much of the upper and middle watersheds had inadequate buffer, and inadequate buffer isn't just the lack of trees, but it's also the quality of the trees. It's are the trees covered in invasive vegetation? What is the understory like? Is the entire understory all English ivy? Is the English ivy going up the trees and hurting the canopy? So we considered all these when we designated the inadequate buffer sites. So these are the same parameters, but in the middle to the lower watershed. And there's no inadequate buffer in Patapsco Valley State Park because it's all protected land. So once we looked at the problems in the watershed, we then assessed where are the most severe problems. And we wanted to do that because we wanted to develop 2 stream concept plans for the Bull Branch watershed. And we selected the upper watershed from Rolling Road to Meller, which we are calling Reach 1 as our first proposed concept area because of the severe bank erosion, pipe outfalls. We identified 1 sanitary sewer leak, inadequate buffer, invasive vegetation, and very important, the potential damage to infrastructure and properties. Now, the stream is located on Baltimore County properties, but there are private properties very close to the stream limits. And those properties are mainly on Monomore and Glen Ray. And I'm going to walk you through photographs of what we saw in this first reach one. The left photo is Bull Branch facing the culvert at Meller. This shows it's a fish barrier, but it's also the stream has a head cutting right here, so you're losing stream grade right here. The picture on the right is an example of severe bank erosion, where this picture is taken facing downstream. So you're looking at the left bank, where the property fence is sloping towards the stream. So the stream is endangering private properties in this reach. And this reach is also, it's a bit tricky because you also have a sanitary sewer line that parallels the stream in this area, and then it crosses the stream a little bit further down in this reach. This, we thought it was a sanitary sewer leak. We reached out to Patapsco Heritage Greenway, and it was investigated by the county. And at the time of assessment, it was determined that it was not a leak. Here, we would just recommend that it continues to be monitored. There does appear to be something causing the channel to be murky, and it had a strong sewage smell. The photograph on the left is an example of an encased sanitary sewer crossing that at one point was likely at the level, the stream grade was at this level. So since it has down cut 4 feet. The photograph on the right is channel alteration. There was evidence of concrete in the channel. I believe at one point this entire reach was channelized. But you can also see this is all invasive vegetation here along the banks, the steep slopes, and erosion. And this is still in the reach 1, which is north of South Rolling Road up to Meller. These are more examples of the same reach. There are fences falling in along the top of the bank and severe, just raw bank erosion. More examples of the same thing, an inadequate buffer, trees falling in the stream. And in this reach, we did speak with a resident, and he informed us that BGE cuts down all the tree limbs to maintain the overhead right away. And what they do is they allow the large limbs and trees to fall into the stream, which then creates debris jams and causes more bank erosion. So that is a concern of the residents that live in this reach. And when I'm out in the stream, I really love to hear from the residents because we're not in your backyards every day. So if you see us out there and you have something you want to tell us, please, feel free to come over and share. It helps us put all these puzzle pieces together. This is a photograph of the unnamed tributary in the same reach, but this originates at Newburgh. We identified a sanitary sewer leak here, contacted Patapsco Heritage Greenway, who contacted the county and confirmed it was a sewer leak. And it's the same problem here, entrenched channel, bank erosion, properties on both sides of the stream, even though the stream is on Baltimore County property. So from this, we have a draft concept, and I just pulled a couple of the sheets, the design sheets out to just show you basically what we do. So sheet 1 and sheet 3 up here, that's where Meller is. And then sheet 9 down here is South Rolling Road. So what we would propose at Meller is a plunge pool downstream of the culvert to help dissipate some of the energy before it hits the main Bull Branch. Currently, it's a G eroding channel. We would propose to move the stream a little bit towards more of the center of the channel, away from these properties, just line it here. And also you would need to have some bank treatments in this area, and the type of bank treatment would really depend on how much water you could capture in the upper watershed with the BMP recommendations that Andy suggested earlier in the presentation. If it's little to no stormwater, you're looking at still having high flows. So you're looking at having like class 3, like very large boulders in there, because those are the ones that aren't going to move during the 100-year flows. You can't have smaller materials in there if you can't control the water in the upper watershed. This is the tributary. So Newburgh is like over here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but we would also propose a plunge pool at the outfall of Newburgh, and then a series of riffle and weirs to help slow down the water within that tributary before it reaches the main stem bowl branch. For our second concept, we picked the middle reach, we called it Reach 2, and this is in between collegiate and college. And this is because there is severe bank erosion. There's many trees falling into the channel from the bank erosion. It's also located on Baltimore County property, and this is where a CCBC, a lot of the stormwater from there flows into this portion of the reach. And I'm just going to show you some examples of what we saw in the field here. So this is outfall, and it has sinkholes that are developing. This is Campus Drive on CCBC property. The right photo is the tributary that is coming from the outfall that is also eroding before it meets Bull Branch. These two photographs are examples of bank erosion. Both of these are downstream or south of Campus Drive. This is an example of the trees falling into the stream. Looks like this, the tree on the left looks like it's an ash tree. I can see the trail marks of the emerald ash borer. That is a major problem within the watershed. But it's not just the ash trees that are falling, it's the poplars too. It's all the trees are being compromised. The right is a exposed pipe, manhole, dangerously close to eroding bank within the middle watershed. The left picture is a steep slope that receives runoff from CCBC. And what's happening is the overland flow is causing channeling, and it's making the trees like all the way on top of the slope to fall. And eventually they end up in the stream channel. But this is a stormwater management issue. And we reached out to Patapsco Heritage, who reached out to CCBC, because we felt that these issues were kind of alarming ones, and we wanted to make sure they were aware. And they are actually working on their own stormwater management plan for the campus. The photograph on the right is just an example of tree fall and bank erosion in this middle reach, Reach 2. Then more examples, but the photograph on the right is actually a failing gabion basket, which is behind College Hills 3, just north of Collegiate. So we developed a draft concept for this reach as well. Sheet 2, that's up at Campus Drive here. Sheet 9 is down at Collegiate. There's the YMCA, here's College Hills 2 and College Hills 3. If you can see my cursor is at the lower portion of the sheet. We would propose to prepare the eroded outfall and also to install riffles and pools to help check the water velocities and dissipate the energy coming from the CCBC before it hits the main stem bowl branch. We would also propose bank erosion treatments within the main stem bowl branch and the removal of the debris jams. A lot of the times, the debris jams too, if they're larger trees, trees can be repurposed and used in either habitat features or used in the stream restoration structures in the design. There is an existing head cut located at a wetland. So it's near where the YMCA property meets the Baltimore County property. So we would propose to fix the head cut so that it doesn't keep migrating upstream and causing more channel degradation. We also looked at alternative BMPs and additional practices in the watershed. These are practices that homeowners or institutions can partake in. Like they're practices such as rain gardens, rainwater harvesting, and landscape infiltration. And rainwater harvesting usually see that in the form of like rain barrels attached to downspouts. This publication, the Watershed Stewards Academy Rainscaping Manual, is an excellent resource for everyone to check out. It shows you examples of what the finished products look like. It tells you approximate costs, so that is a great resource if, as a homeowner, you're interested in applying one of these practices on your property. And this is an example. This is from the manual, where it looks at traditional on the left practices versus newer stormwater practices. So as an example, traditional would be landscape islands and raised up curbs. And a stormwater approach would be more of the rain gardens, the depressions, to help capture the water and not contribute to the surface runoff. Another example of traditional practices is the typical paved driveway, where a stormwater practice would be one of the permeable paver materials that would allow some stormwater to seep through the pavers and into the ground. We performed a forest characterization where we identified the forest types throughout the watershed. We also included recommendations for deer protection and invasive management. The volunteer citizens are doing a really good job with cutting the vines at the base of the tree trunks, and that is apparent throughout the watershed. These maps are examples of the forest types that we found in the watershed, where we have the mature mixed oak forest in the Patapsco Valley, and we have the more mid-cereal to disturbed forests in the upper to mid watersheds. We looked at areas for potential pre-tree planting within the watershed, and we just want to make sure, before anything's planted or any you can do anything, basically just make sure that you have all landowner approvals, everyone's on board for the tree planting, and the future of the land use. Like, we wouldn't want to do a tree planting if we're sure we're going to do one of the stream restoration projects. We wouldn't want to do a planting in that same area. So the next steps for this assessment is we were finalizing the BMP recommendations. We're going to collect additional data in the 2 reaches that we're proposing for a concept. Those are the reaches that are from South Rolling Road to Meller and from Collegiate to College. We're going to do cross sections, pebble counts. That helps us determine what the primary substrate is within that channel. We're going to do a functional uplift assessment to see what the benthic macroinvertebrate and fish communities look like. It's just going to be an assessment to family for the benthics. Just we can determine if they're pollution tolerant or pollution intolerant. We're going to use this information to finalize the concept plans. And we're going to use information from this meeting and additional feedback to finalize the report and the concept plans, and need to work with Baltimore County, Restoring Bull Branch, and Patapsco Heritage Greenway throughout the process. And as my final note before I take questions, I just want to say that the stream corridor assessment protocol has us looking for problems in the watershed, and it's not set up to see all the good things, but it is a beautiful watershed. It has nice vernal pools and wetland habitats. And you can tell that there's been trash cleanup, stream cleanup, watershed cleanup programs, because we had very few, for an urban watershed, we had very few trash dumping sites. And the basin vegetation, which I mentioned before, where the vines have been cut at the tree bases from volunteers. There's a list of volunteers here, but I know like there's many more in the watershed. You can tell that it's very supported from volunteers, residents, businesses. So at this time, unless Erin or Suzanne have anything, we can take some questions.
Go for it.
Did you have anything that you wanted to add on the end?
Well, the questions that I have written here, I have just the two for now, because I think some people are still digesting, because it was a lot of great information. So thank you, Amy and Andy, for that. For BMP 9, that looks like it's the retaining pond in College Hills 3 and College Hills 4 and part of Foxhall Farm. One of our participants wanted to know why it was marked yellow on the map, if there was significance to that yellow color versus being another color on there.
I have to go back to that slide. Let me see. I don't think there's a significance to it. I think they might have all been yellow.
Just to be bright to say, hey, that's a
Yeah.
BMP.
Yeah, it was just so that they stand out on the map. There isn't a reason that they're marked yellow. All of the existing BMPs are yellow, and the one new proposed BMP, that one right there, that's in green. So that one's different because it's a newly proposed BMP.
Fantastic. And then the other one, I'm not sure actually if any of us can answer, but I want to see if there's more information for it. Because it's, we mentioned, and as we know, that CCBC has their own stormwater plan. Basically, just do any of us have more information about it, such as its time or status? Is there an effort to coordinate with their plan? Be consistent with efforts? I know from my take and working with Mandy for CCBC, that's where we would have to talk to their representative more, because I know the person that we have as a stakeholder isn't in direct work with that stormwater plan. That's a different department for it. So we would have to just ask more questions about it, but know that any kind of restoration work that is going to be done, if it deals anything with CCBC, they have to approve it before we can do anything.
Yes, they would. And I believe that the CCBC plan, they were still working on, Mandy spoke with their representative, and they were still working on obtaining funding for a portion of it. So I think that is going to be several years out compared to our final being issued in September. However, this is like the first part. This is the first step in this. So even if 5 years from now or some other time, you would like to do stream restoration in Reach 2, the one that's downstream of CCBC, at that time you would obtain new information, new stormwater computations to prepare that final stream restoration plan. These are just draft plans to give an idea of techniques that could be used within that reach. And then when they go to more of the final design, that's when you could obtain information and use those for your channel sizing.
So fantastic. Another question that we have on there is for the assessment. It seems, while it does maybe end at collegiate, it's asked, someone asked, would there be another kind of in-depth assessment of the area south of collegiate? Or is it mainly just not necessarily the whole assessment goes across the whole board, but it was chosen for the reaches based on priority in that way? So while it maybe not seems to end at Collegiate Drive, maybe that's where the assessments of why the stream restorations occurred there were based on several issues or priorities.
So
it'll be
the
a bigger.
two reaches we were to develop two concept plans based on the worst of the worst, and the reaches 1 and 2 had more severe bank erosion. And also the general thought is if you help fix the problems in the upper watershed, the lower watershed also benefits. So if you be able to capture the water in the upper watershed, fix the channel upstream, the lower watershed will benefit as well. And also below collegiate, there is a larger riparian buffer. It's a pretty nice buffer, which is helping with the less erosion in that portion of the stream.
Fantastic. Thank you. Another one is, so there's a pipe outfall on 36 Pepperdine Circle with falling Gambians. So things like that. So certain things that are happening in there, it seems like that one of one was, did you have any specific ones where you noticed pipe outfalls, but you didn't put them in the report just because they seemed very similar for them? Or if for those things, who is responsible for fixing them? So like if there is a pipe outfall, is that a county thing, or is that someone where we need to speak to another representative on how to fix those?
If it's a severe problem, I believe it is a county issue, but if county can chime in on that. It's Haley in the.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, if it's a county outfall, that would be a county thing, but there are private outfalls too. Where was this one located?
At 36 Pepperdine Circle.
Okay, so I can write that down and look into that, and then let you guys know if that's county or if that's private.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Another good one, the question that I think really encompasses a lot of things are, so lands that are not in Reach 1 or Reach 2. So for like this stream assessment, right? Because these are the ones based on priority. Asking about, would they get a report on what was found and what needs to be changed? We know that there's going to be a final draft of that report, but will there be any other kind of, I guess I would say, like additions of what would need to be changed? Like what kinds of things would happen? Or is it just a report on here's what the problems are versus maybe possible solutions?
Well, for the areas that weren't selected as stream restoration, it's just it's a report of the problems, but that's not saying that someone can't take our report and go and also want to do stream restoration in that reach as well. So we're not going to do additional concepts for the areas that are not in the Reach 1 or Reach 2 that I had discussed.
And then another question we got, I think part of us is going to answer. So for Baltimore County on how much the priority is for a project for the county, that's something where PHG and the county have been in discussions because we're getting the actual county comments as well, just because they have a lot of different departments that have a lot of different comments because they do different pieces of it. So we're going to get comments from them, and they're going to be in addition to what the report is, and kind of that finalized report. That's when we'll have a better idea from the county kind of what next steps are once those comments are put in and what that part of it is for budgeting. So for right now, to my knowledge, Haley can speak to it too if there's something different. But for now, there's not necessarily a where this fits in the priority of a budgeting, just because we don't have a final report yet. So until you have a finalized report of everything, it's hard to figure out a budget and a timeline in that sense.
Yeah, and I'll just add that the county wasn't necessarily like involved in this assessment. So it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not your intention to provide these projects to the county to fund. Like obviously if there are issues that come up, like improperly functioning outfalls or something like that, you'd want to let the county know about that. But it's your intention to like take some of these projects and perhaps get grant funding to pursue them, right?
Mm-hmm. For your
Correct.
assessment? Yeah, go
Correct.
for it.
I mean, potential, I mean, that folks from Restoring Bull Branch, there might be grant interest. Certainly if the county expressed interest as part of the, it became a priority, that would be a discussion to have down the road. But certainly I think initially it was what opportunities are there to potentially implement recommendations based upon other sources of support as well.
Right. So I would definitely highly recommend, before like going too far into any projects that are on county land, like let's connect with those county agencies to see what they have planned. Because who knows, maybe there's already something planned for that area, or maybe they've already investigated and realized, oh, it's not going to work because of this reason. So let's just make sure we're staying in communication, and I can connect you to anybody.
You all have some great questions, so I'm rolling through them as we go. So another good one that I like on here to make sure we're also on the time is there's a handful of auto repair businesses off Bloomingdale, and we obviously have a lot of then issues that come with that, such as evidence of oil, antifreeze, car residues. So for BMPs, can anything be done with the proposed new BMP to address those unique issues? I see the wheels turning.
Yes and no. It would depend on where the new BMP is located, whether or not it's downstream of these auto repair businesses. I think the one that we've proposed is downstream of Bill's Music in that parking lot. So I'm not certain we'd be able to get runoff from the other auto repair businesses into that facility. Although that would be a good one if it were downstream of those properties, because it would do a lot of filtering of that within the wetland area. You'd probably need something in that, ball field where the right near the elementary school to handle something like that, and there's no way we'd be allowed to do that.
For the overall assessment, were there any areas considered in the upper watershed where impervious surface or impervious area could be removed?
I didn't see any. I mean, it was mostly parking lots that, nobody's going to want to give up because they're going to need the parking. And then on the other side where they have that large gravel parking lot, that's not really impervious. So I didn't see anything, major where you could really remove anything and get any kind of benefit out of it.
And then another question that I like on here is, with so much of the area being owned or managed by government entities, state park, Baltimore County, is it possible to tap in today's infrastructure money to seed a long-term project? Or do we think we're going to be looking at a different way to be able to move forward with a project such as a big stream restoration? This is really for anyone. Pop up.
I guess I can talk. I'm Carrie Decker from Department of Natural Resources, and yeah, I mean, if it's in the Patapsco Valley State Park, we have programs and have a lot of infrastructure set up to help repair and put some dollars toward those type of projects. We're prioritizing state parks and other public lands for some of our Chesapeake Bay and Atlantic Coastal Bays Trust Fund grants. So that's definitely a good, probability, and it'll, especially if it's, threatening infrastructure or anything like that. And then as far as the Baltimore County, I would say that we get a lot of counties, that do come in for our money, and they might be partnering with other entities, but the counties are usually, at least a lot of counties, step up and are trying to get $1 million+ from from DNR's pot of money that we put out every year for solicitation. So that's certainly within the realm of possibility for this as well.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I don't think it's out of the, realm of possibility. I think that if there's a project that looks promising and needs to happen, we could work with the necessary department and see if they're interested in funding it. That's something that does happen sometimes. I just can't guarantee anything in my lowly NRS2 role, but
I think one of the advantages of us taking this more macro approach, I realize that there are areas here that some people will feel have not been completely addressed or interrogated enough. However, this is the first step, right? To look at the whole watershed and to understand how it's working, because to only address one piece of it is not going to help the problems that we are all encountering. So in some areas we have flooding. In some areas we have, incredible die-off in terms of the forest, the riparian buffers, which are basically the banks along the stream bed. All of this has to we have to look at it in a macro sense, in a comprehensive sense. And then that allows us to work in a more coordinated fashion. So yes, there are some areas that are not as fully addressed, like I think the lower watershed, the Reach 3 doesn't have as much, because really the really most the biggest impact areas right now is the amount of impervious surface and the amount of water that's coming off of parking lots and off the business district. But that does not mean that doing something there is going to leave some other part behind. So what I would like to stress here is that this first macro look at everything does not mean that we are going to just not look at other places. Like we had to prioritize something. We had grant money. We couldn't look at the whole thing and recommend an entire, and anytime you come into a situation and you make really macro, gross, large recommendations, people get concerned, right? It makes them uncomfortable. So we're looking at the whole thing, and then we're going to see what we can do project by project. So this is a first step. I just want to really emphasize that.
I'm looking at our questions to make sure I'm not missing anything, because some things are overlapping. So like one of the things that we talked about was the Catonsville Business District, and basically looking at, so like in the upper watershed runoff, like that is a large problem about why, all of the flooding is occurring is from this business district area, right? So there's a drive pond in the Fusting area that does not appear to add to downstream flooding. So within the report, will there be more addressing the major flooding that occurs in the Catonsville Business District, and then how that will affect the middle and lower restoration efforts? Will that be in the report?
Well, that's what we've done by adding the retrofit of BMP number 2, and then the new BMP at right there up near Bloomingdale, right downstream of the parking lot. That's to help address the runoff from the central business district up there, Catonsville Business District. That's what the main one down there near Miller Avenue does. That's going to take a lot of the water that dumps from a lot of the storm bring outfalls into that location. So we've kind of addressed a fair amount of the flooding issues from upstream at those 2 locations, as best as we can. I mean, there's not a whole lot of other areas where we can put anything.
Within the stream restoration for the various plunge ponds, for paying for that, who necessarily would pay for that, or does it depend on how the project is funded? Because they're a specific piece of the stream restoration, or could they be done separately as not part of a big restoration?
I've typically seen them be done with the stream restoration projects and funded as part of those. I don't know if Haley or Carrie has any other ways that they have seen just plunge pools be funded.
No, I mean, it would normally be part of a
Yeah.
stream restoration or stormwater outfall
I've seen
type.
separate ones for, say, MDOT projects for state highway where they just do a bunch of outfalls all throughout a county or along different roadways and things like that. Because once they came out with that new outfall manual, I mean, they kind of opened up the floodgates on how much credit you can get on a lot of the outfalls for water quality. So occasionally some of the counties and some of the MDOTs will put out proposals just for a whole bunch of outfalls along a
Yeah.
roadway or in a different watershed. You might get
Yeah.
lucky. Who knows if Baltimore County will do that?
It's not the best approach. Normally, I would say that's not a good idea, but you know, they have different standards than maybe we do. But
Yeah, because they used to get like a maximum of 2 acres of credit, and then they recently changed it in like 2019, where it's based on a whole bunch of other factors, and now you can get, it's just opened up the floodgates on what you can get for crediting.
yeah.
Another question we have here is, Haley previously stated that some of the outfalls are private versus some are county-based. So apparently in the past, even though some have been private because they've been on HOA property, but the county have paid for repairs, apparently for outfalls between 25 and 27 Ivy League Drive. If an HOA has to pay for repairs, are there ways to get grants or similar support for those HOAs?
I am not aware of any grants that we have at the county for that or support, but I could look into that. That's just not really my department.
Fantastic.
All right, it's a lot of I'll speak up. The HOAs can get money to do all kinds of different projects, either through the Chesapeake Bay Trust, or a lot of other grant sources, but I mean, normally they're looking for something that's tying, more than one small outfall together. What else is there? What else is going to be done? But there are definitely options for the HOAs to go after money. Sure, certainly.
So are you saying there's a way for us to maybe work together as HOAs and make an application kind of jointly saying we want to do 3 projects at once?
Yeah, that's a possibility. I mean, using Patapsco Heritage, or a larger entity that can handle the grant and the cash and the invoicing and all those things. I'm working with some marinas right now, and they want to do some work, and we kind of need to get a third party involved, to help them out, either a trade association or a watershed group or something like that. It can probably would be better. But we can talk about that more for sure.
Yeah.
Yes, Kathy, there does need to be a water quality benefit. Yes, my old boss is chiming in. Yeah, I forgot to mention that part. I mean, I just assume that everyone knows that, but they probably don't, that there does need to be a water quality reduction that the county or someone will claim, in most cases. There would be a nitrogen phosphorus sediment reduction. We also look for, habitat enhancement. We look at equity. We look at access. We look at all kinds of other co-benefits to help these applications. So all that matters.
So just for general understanding here, there's basically an agreement between the state and the counties in terms of how there's a requirement to manage stormwater and water quality, and the state expects the counties to do this work, and they give credits to the county. And so the county is interested, they're invested from that standpoint. So that's how you create buy-in from both parties. And so even though to us, it doesn't seem like stormwater quality, the water quality is as, we're looking at it more as flooding, but of course flooding takes away from water quality. So that's how those things work together. And those credits, even though that feels very bureaucratic, those credits are critical to this kind of, to this overall work. Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
This has all been an education for me over the last 18 months.
Yeah, we are starting to look a lot more at, flooding and those type of, projects. And we had a grant called the Resiliency for Restoration for the last 5 to 6 years, where we were focusing more on sea level rise and storm and inundation and things like that. So less money there, but it's definitely coming up a lot. So yeah.
So I want to make sure there's a couple comments and one other question. We're going to do those. And then I think what Diana will do, she'll unmute everybody afterwards. And we would just ask if folks want to ask questions that they raise their hand. So we'll do that at least for the final sort of 10 minutes of time. But I wanted to recognize a couple comments. One, at least a comment about needing to look closer at the elementary school field and the 2 ponds. Comment that neither of those ponds captures Bull Run, and they were related to past school construction phases. The county did replace the Bull Run pipe from Bloomingdale to Meller with a 30 or 32 inch pipe to move stormwater. So I don't know if there's necessarily a question there, but at least a comment in looking at the field and the 2 ponds. I don't know if Andy or Amy wanted to address that at all.
Yeah, there's no real way to do anything with that water that's already in the pipe that goes straight underneath that concrete, lined area that goes right under Meller Avenue. I mean, you can't pull any water out of that and do anything with it because it's already pretty low and in the ground. Plus, it's not causing any problems the way it's going just through the pipe and then running under Meller. It's that opening where everything on the ball field floods and then runs in there at the same time, and that other smaller facility that's behind the ball field when that floods from all the other storm drain outfalls. And then you get some kind of clog there at the end of that concrete runway. Then everything just backs up. That's where they've had problems in the past.
Okay. And then this is a big picture question. If all or most of the recommendations in the report were to be adopted and completed, what will happen or not happen? So that is really looking ahead and maybe a bit sort of, what's possible. So I don't know if anyone wants to take a stab at that big picture question.
Well, I think controlling water quantity in the upper watershed is important, and that would be less flooding in the middle to lower watersheds. Probably that's the #1 priority, controlling the water in the upper watershed. And I want to mention too, so in typical situations where you have piped streams, a lot of the times those streams are daylighted, which means you take the pipe out and the stream is above ground again, has access to a floodplain. Now, we briefly considered that for the stream at Bloomingdale, but you would lose all the athletic fields, all the space behind Catonsville Elementary. And I don't think that would have support losing all that to be able to do daylight Bull Branch in those fields.
I think I don't know if you want to turn it over, Diana, and open it up. There is another question in the Q&A I can ask.
You can go for it, but also everybody's been unmuted. It says
Okay, so-
talking permitted. I think all except sadly Tom, because he's an older version of Zoom.
Okay, so Tom's question is, who is responsible for
Yes.
cleaning the streams from fallen trees? Can they be done by volunteers, or is county approval necessary?
I don't know about the county approval. I know that if a tree has fallen and it's blocking the flow of a stream, the county will take care of it usually. I don't know about approval though. I can ask about that. Is that on public property or is that private property?
I don't, I mean, I assume that the question would be, it's probably on public property.
Public, yeah. 'Cause
Assuming you would need, you know, if the question is about asking for county approval, like knowing that it's on public.
yeah, I would think you would want to talk to the county before removing anything, any trees from the stream on public property. Yep.
Oh, Tom says it's a private HOA. So is that something that you talk to your HOA about? And then
Hmm.
they pay to do it.
Removing trees is this whole weird nuanced thing. I'm gonna be completely honest. It's kind of hard to keep up with sometimes. So I can ask, I can't see where Tom is writing for some reason,
Yeah.
but is it impeding the flow of the stream, Tom?
It's in the Q&A box versus the chat box.
Let's see.
I think he says it, yes, potentially impeding the flow of the stream, but
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, so then we'd want to check it out and we could send it to the if you send me the location, we can check it out and then forward it to it's not our department that does that, but figure out what they do with HOA land. I'm honestly not sure. Sorry.
that's fine. No, I appreciate your input though, Haley. So I mean, I don't want to, Diana sort of opened it up and I don't know if folks are raising their hand or not. So if anyone does want to ask a direct question that you're free to do so in the last 10 minutes. We just ask you to use the raise hand feature so 7 people aren't asking the same question at one time.
Haley raised her hand.
Yeah, I just have a comment. I saw in the report that a couple times it was mentioned that you guys weren't able to locate stormwater plans for the stormwater BMPs you were looking at. And I was kind of surprised by that because we have a stormwater section and I confirmed that there can look up any plan you want. So if you want stormwater plans for these specific areas, just let me know and I can get them to, connect you with the right number.
Perfect, thanks.
Yeah.
I would like to offer, if there's anybody on this call that's interested in learning more about the grant process, what's available, I'm happy to speak with you, to talk about possibilities. There's quite a bit there are a lot of resources out there. You do have to kind of gird your loins and get ready because it's going to be somewhat administrative and bureaucratic. But it's not impossible. So if anybody is interested in, putting together a grant application, some of these grant applications can be done through HOAs. They does not have to go through PHG. There are options. So I'd be happy to, brainstorm with you.
Anyone else have any other questions? Either you're welcome to type them in the chat box or voice them. If not, we can bring the public meeting to a conclusion. But I want to give folks at least one last chance to ask any questions that they might have.
Kathy has a question.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time looking at these small maps on the screen. So I was wondering if they're going to be available so that I can actually look at them in a little more detail.
Yes, so the maps that are more legible are will be in the reports. Many of the maps I've just put in the presentation to show as example maps. So the maps in the report are definitely more legible than the ones in the presentation.
Is the report, the draft report, going to be available before you finalize it? That's what I mean.
Okay. The draft report will be available after we address Baltimore County and Patapsco Heritage Greenway comments. So
Okay.
yeah, but it's going to be a couple months off because we need time to receive the comments and address them.
Okay. Are you going to have another public meeting after that?
Yes, there's one more public meeting that is to occur. It probably will be late August, September-ish. What do you think, Aaron and Suzanne?
That's the general timeline we're looking at. Yeah, late August, early September. I mean, what I would say in response to the question is, I mean, the video will be available on our YouTube channel, and it might be a bit easier to at least zoom in on the map via YouTube, via the YouTube video than it would be during the box presentation that you have here on Zoom. So that might give you at least a slightly better glance at some of the maps. I know when we talked about this, Amy and Andy did add some additional maps to the slides for the upper, middle, and lower watershed. So just with the idea that we wanted to make sure folks were able to locate things. So I think if you zoom in on some of those, even on the video, it might end up giving you at least a clearer vision than what you were able to see this evening. Were there any other questions, Diana?
Not that I can see in both the Q&A and the chat itself.
Mandy has a question.
I have a question. It's not a question so much as I wanted to mention the stream walk and talk we have planned for next Thursday. We are going to meet at Bull Branch and walk along the stream and see what we can see. And it is an open event. So in the follow-up email for this, Diana is going to send out a link to that event if you're interested in joining us.
And some of you, the Bull Branch, the Patapsco Heritage Greenway, i.e. you and Diana, will be available because you are the ones that can help interpret what some of these more arcane technical terms and approaches, you can help us interpret it.
Yeah, I didn't explain it very well, but the idea is that we will both look at the some of the technical terms in the report compared to what we're seeing on the ground, and then also look at the erosion and the things that are happening in the stream, as well as, if I'm there, we're going to be looking for critters. So just sort of appreciating the environment, but also talking about some of the concepts that came up in the report so that we can just wrap our minds around them a little bit better.
And that's open to anyone. So if people have other people they want to invite, certainly children, it's always fun to stomp through the stream. So.
And make sure you guys know that it is a Thursday evening. So we're talking 6 p.m.
I mean, the one other thing I would add is certainly please do come out and join us for that. But I think Amy and Andy's presentation concluded with both the organizations and stakeholders, some discussion of alternative practices, alternative BMPs and practices that may not be as large scale as some of the recommendations earlier in the report, but certainly important for what can be done in the larger sub watershed. And we as an organization here at PSG certainly are interested in exploring some of those alternative BMPs. We do a variety of tree planting and stream cleanup activities throughout the Patapsco watershed, and have done a fair amount obviously in Bull Branch as well. So over the coming year, as those possibilities develop further, we certainly intend to continue to be involved and supportive of those projects across the Bull Branch watershed.
And I'll just add that this all started because we just basically wanted to find out what we could do. So I know people get frustrated, they feel like the problems are too big, but honestly, this started out with just me sending an email to some folks. And like I said, people were so embracing, they just really were excited about my interests. So if you're interested, and even if you don't have a lot of time, we can make a difference. So please reach out, and we'll get it done.
Diane, I'll let you close.
So I just want to thank everyone for not only coming and seeing the presentation, but also for asking really great questions. Please know that if your question wasn't answered, or you felt like you still have more as it goes on, or you're seeing more out there, please make sure you email us at info@patapsco.org. Don't worry, you'll be receiving at least 2 emails from me that'll have not only the thank you email of coming, which will have our walk and talk Bull Branch event linked to it, so you can register for that. But then also most likely then you'll get another email from me next week once this webinar has then been uploaded to our YouTube page. So that way you can have a direct link to view that. We also encourage you to send this link to other parts of your stakeholder group or other family members that live in the watershed. So maybe they couldn't come tonight, but they're really interested, or you're talking to somebody and they become really interested in it. So that way they have some information about it. The whole idea of this public meeting is to make sure we get as many thoughts and questions as possible, to make sure we understand how all of this is not only affecting you, but how it's affecting us, because we're all connected to it. So thank you so much, everyone. And I hope you have a great evening, and we really hope to see you at the walk and talk as well.